Hi, this is Omar. In this video assignment for my Crime in Italian Cinema course, I will be comparing and contrasting a scene from the films Once Upon a Time in the West and Black Sabbath. I'll specifically be focusing on their usage of close-ups. Now, I'll be talking about how the scene is set up and shot, what happens in the scenes, why close-ups are used in them, what the effect is, as well as the greater thematic and narrative importances of the scenes. Let's start off with the scene from Once Upon a Time in the West. It's from the first act and it introduces Cheyenne. Now this scene is significant because it's the initial crossing of paths between the three protagonists of the film, Joel, Cheyenne, and Harmonica. It establishes Harmonica's strange quirk of playing the harmonica, which is why he's named that, instead of speaking, while having elements of intrigue and tension, what with Cheyenne seeming morally ambiguous, and everyone in the salon being unsure as to what he'll do or what will happen. It also drives home the point that Jill is in unfamiliar territory. She's from New Orleans, she's not used to this sort of stuff. Meanwhile, the scene from Black Sabbath is from the second story, The Wordalak. It's from near the end of the story, and it tragically depicts Denka succumbing to the Wordalaks, despite Vladimir's efforts to save her. Her vampiric family manipulates her into choosing to stay and turn into one of them, instead of escaping to safety with her lover. Now, to compare these two scenes, we could start by focusing on their settings. A Once Upon a Time in the West scene takes place in broad daylight in a crowded, dusty salon in the Wild West. There's multiple extras here and they're all doing their own thing separately from Jill. Black Sabbath scene is the exact opposite. It takes place alone, past midnight, in the outer ruins of an Eastern European convent. We specifically see that Vladimir is asleep in a location away from her. He's not there to protect her. Now, when it comes to the mise-en-scene and the cinematography, Once Upon a Time in the West scene has the extras and Jill assuming a sort of fixed, tense, scared position in reaction to Cheyenne and Harmonica. The scene focuses on the two of them. They're around the two protagonists, the extras and Jill, and they mostly serve as reaction shots to emphasize the sort of unique atmosphere created by the two, and the palpable intrigue being caused here. Notice how every time we get a close-up in the scene, after Cheyenne's appearance, shadows tend to obscure the face of the person we're closing in on, so we can only focus on their eyes. There's distrust in them. These shots tend to hang on their face or follow them in their every movement, and the length of them builds up the tension. This once bustling saloon is now transfixed, and it remains that way until Cheyenne gets an extra to shoot his chains. Now, Black Sabbath has a completely different feel. It contrasts this by focusing on isolating Stenka and making her seem small. We first see her from the corner of the screen being watched by her father, who is much larger in the frame. There's this creepy feel of voyeurism because she's unaware that she's being watched at first. After that, every time there's a shot of her, her father, her brother, or her sister-in-law, they're the only person in the frame. And notice that every time she's the subject of the shot, she's slightly lower in frame than they are, which subconsciously furthers this feeling of her being looked down on, of her being judged, or her being weak to their manipulation. The hazy, foggy look of the scene is also a representation of how she's feeling internally before she's emerged, full of dread and uncertainty. So, how do the main characters of these scenes interact with their environments? Well, Cheyenne and Harmonica are the ones commanding the scene in Once Upon a Time in the West. They are the ones in authority, while the others fearfully look on to see how their actions unfold. The viewer is meant to think, oh, these two are powerful, they can stand their ground. The direct opposite is going on with Stenka in Black Sabbath. She's completely powerless against her vampiric family. Interestingly, the close-ups of her family are actually from her perspective, and they seem as if they're disapprovingly staring at her, applying pressure on her to join them. Now let's look at the sound in both.
Pick it up.
The repeated harmonica music in Once Upon a Time in the West, which underlines the tension and discomfort in the scene, is diegetic. It's actually being played by Harmonica himself. The dialogue too is obviously diegetic. However, the score that does play, besides the harmonica itself, is in fact extra diegetic, and it's there to accentuate the mood for the audience. It's basically the feelings being conveyed to the characters are the exact same feelings being conveyed to the audience. We're supposed to feel the same way they do. Meanwhile, the music in Black Sabbath is completely extra diegetic. The dialogue isn't. The music is for the audience to get a window into how Zdenka feels. Now, finally, how do these scenes help interpret the themes of their films? Put it simply, I'd say that the usage of close-ups in Black Sabbath are to emphasize feelings of fear, judgment, and being stuck in a position that you cannot escape from, while the close-ups in Once Upon a Time in the West are there to simultaneously create this atmosphere of tension and uncertainty, while also emphasizing the importance and power of Cheyenne and harmonica. Black Sabbath is a horror film, so scaring the viewer, making them feel distrustful, that would be its theme. And its scene obviously serves that purpose. It's tragic. It spits in the face of Vladimir's efforts to save both him and Zdenka, and sends them to their inescapable doom, which is what the film is all about. It's a bit trickier to answer this question with Once Upon a Time in the West. I would argue that that film has a theme of trying to define how masculinity and femininity, how their roles are effective, at least the notions of what their roles should be, would be effective in building the dream of America near the end of the Wild West. So I would say that this scene highlights what the usual idea of a strong, legendary man was in films such as these and at the time. So, there you have it. This was me comparing and contrasting a scene from either film that both uses close-ups for a specific effect, and how both films have the close-ups serve completely different purposes.